Well, the situation with Alec Baldwin on the movie set Rust is causing a lot of national attention, obviously. The accidental discharge of a prop gun killing a woman and injuring the director of the movie. Ben Manis has been on the show with me before. Ben, actually, and I didn't know this, Ben, all the times I've talked to you, and you're an expert in law enforcement and safety and all these issues, but I had no idea that you consulted for Hollywood. It's big time.
Yes, I worked a couple of TV shows, and in D.C., I worked, set work for Minority Report, West Wing. There were very few things shot in D.C., but this was back during the prohibition on firearms that was overturned by the Supreme Court, which meant Metropolitan Police officers had to be there to watch the armorers. So that's a good segue on the issue here at Rust, which was a very low-budget production. So there's three issues. One, who's criminally liable? Two, who's civilly liable? And three, what does this mean for Hollywood? So criminally, for everyone who's, really cautiously looking and hoping Alec Baldwin, because of the Schadenfreude involved here, goes to jail, it's not very likely. Alec Baldwin, like most talent, doesn't know anything about firearms. So on a Hollywood set, what they do is an armorer is supposed to be there, and a technical advisor is usually there to train the talent, and the armorer hands the weapon to the talent at that point, declaring that it's clear and ready to be fired with blanks. And
they say cold gun, right?
Yeah, well, so, okay, hot gun versus cold gun. That's a good point because everyone's saying it in the media. There is no hot gun on a set, i.e., that the person who's likely to go to jail for this is a 24-year-old woman named Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who is the armorer. And the question really as to the civil liability is, because Alec Baldwin was a producer, right? Mm-hmm. Why was a 24-year-old whose only real credit for this was that her dad was an armorer before she was an armorer, given a job where you usually have to be military and NRA certified as an armorer to get this job, right? She wasn't on set. She basically left the guns out. And this particular weapon had a round in the chamber because on an old single-action Western gun, you load through the side, and it just was apparently left in there in one of the hot chambers. So why was a .45 long Colt round left in a gun on a prop set? You're not even supposed to have a live round anywhere near the sets. And the mere fact that got on that set tells you a lot about who's going to get charged.
Ben Manis is with me. Ben is an expert in all this stuff. It's great to have him. He writes, of course, for Philadelphia's wonderful Broad and Liberty, a former D.C. police officer and federal officer, and he's worked as a technical advisor for both TV and film productions to include the movie Minority Report, also ABC cable networks as well. Ben, I'm grateful for your time today. I have a lot of other questions, too. Now, apparently, according to the affidavit, so Alec Baldwin was aiming at a camera, because I understand that's standard. They don't have people aiming at each other to aim at the camera. And he was going to shoot at the camera. He pulls the gun out of his holster to do a cross thing to then fire at the camera. And somehow along the way, from that movement from out of the holster on his left side with his right hand and then moving across, the gun discharges and fires at the people. So the question is, did he even fire it himself, or was it a pure accidental discharge? That's one of those questions.
Yeah, that's not completely clear yet. So if they were doing what was called a POV shot, that completely explains how the cinematographer and the director were hit. So that means he was shooting at the camera because you want to get that angle where, you're squaring off on a guy and he's firing at you. So he drew from this cross-draw holster, and he pointed directly at the camera. Of course, the camera person, the woman who got killed, was sitting right behind the viewfinder. And then it makes sense that the director would have been sitting behind her and caught the pass-through, right? So, was it a POV shot or was it just some kind of freak accident? We don't know. The point is, why, in God's green earth, was there a live round in the chamber of that weapon? Plus, more importantly for Alec Baldwin, as a producer on the set, why didn't he hire a technical advisor to train all the talent on how to use a single-action Western revolver? These are not easy guns because you have to cock them and fire them every time versus a modern gun where you could just pull the trigger.
Why does Hollywood even use real guns? Why don't they just make fake guns? In this day and age, when they can make fake dinosaurs, why even use a real weapon in the first place?
For the most part, it has to do with the availability of the weapons, right? And the fact that you could get blanks for real guns. So if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and upholding the duty of care, and that's where the real liability here is. The complete, and there was a walk-off on the ZAM set, and there was work hour violations for the union. The duty of care to provide for a safe and secure environment for this set was not upheld, and somebody is getting a lot of trouble. They can charge him criminally for this, but this is Santa Fe, New Mexico, so the question is the DA going to have the intestinal fortitude to do that? But in a perfect world, if you look at a production from like a Michael Mann or, a David Simon, these are people who spend the money and hire technical advisors who came from that world, police, fire, military, to train everyone.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do this here. And then he had a 24-year-old uncertified woman doing the armorer work whose job it is to, maintain the functionality and clear and issue a gun to each person on the set. She didn't do that either. So, he's in a lot of trouble here. Whether it's not criminal, it might be civil.
It's really a lot of negligence, no doubt about it. They said the film crew's armor had laid 3 prop guns on a rolling cart. The film's assistant director grabbed one for the rehearsal and handed it to Baldwin. And then the other question is, were other people handling those weapons before they were handed to him? And
right.
Apparently, yes. Apparently, that was the case. And then the armorer took possession of the prop gun that Baldwin fired in the spent casing and turned the gun over to detectives. But other people might have had the gun before the armorer gave it to Baldwin. I mean, there's all kinds of things that went. It just seems like there was just a lot of carelessness on the set of this movie.
100%. The fact that the guns were just sitting out on a cart, right, is your main problem here. When I worked at a television show in Texas called Killer Women, it was an ABC show, wasn't very good, didn't last very long. But we had real Texas Rangers on the set because the main character was a Texas Ranger. So we hired real Texas Rangers to coach her. I was there advising, and then we had a proper armorer who was a former military combat arms instructor, and every weapon was issued to every, so this is Mark Lucas's gun. This is, this character's gun. And they would issue that gun. No one else would handle it. And every time it would come off the set, it was checked. Every time it would go back on the set, it was checked. That's how it was supposed to be. They did not do this here. And, when you think about the other things involved in Hollywood, and this is the greater issue, obviously there's a lot of schadenfreude because Alec Baldwin in 2017 was the first guy to run out there and criticize a trained police officer for a shooting. And now here he is in that, horrible instance. But leaving that out, Hollywood is a very unionized environment, but it's still the only place in America that skirts most of your, workplace safety laws, because you get in the union after you're hired, and you're hired based on a who-you-know situation. So the mere fact that there wasn't a technical advisor on that set and the armorer was wholly unqualified, and some reports are she wasn't even there during that take, like an AD handed the gun to him. Without, he didn't know how to check it.
Let me ask this question, which is bugging me too. How does live ammunition even get introduced to the set in the first place? When you go into the prop closet, I'm assuming that shelf A is not live ammunition and shelf B is blanks. There shouldn't be any live ammunition anywhere near the set, right? So how does that get introduced into that environment?
It's not supposed to be on that environment, period.
Right.
For our law enforcement friends listening right now, the Philadelphia police officers sitting in their car listening on their radios, they know, because when they go to a shoot house in the academy for training, like the simunitions training, they actually take your magazines and your live weapon, and then they hand you the simunitions gun for when you go into the shoot houses. It's a similar environment on a set. There is not supposed to be even in Texas, where I filmed the TV show, right? The only people with a live handgun on those sets were the Austin police officers doing set security, and they were on the perimeter. So why was there even a round on the set, nevertheless, in the chamber of the weapon, is beyond me. And this is so negligent. This is not that hard a thing to feature, because you actually need to check every chamber in an old revolver. You have to load them one by one. So there's literally no way you could mess this up.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and I feel like there's something else that's going to come out about all this, Ben. It just seems to me that this is one of those things that could have been, I mean, it's 100% completely avoidable. Somebody had to introduce live ammunition on that movie set. To your point, they don't ever use it. There's no reason for it to be there. It wasn't like they grabbed the wrong shell case. You know, this is the kind of thing that never, ever should have happened. It just, yeah, I think to your point, this armorer, she's in trouble. The people that worked with her, they're in trouble. Anybody who touched that firearm before it was given to him. But I guess, I mean, I still come back to this point about the fake dinosaur. We can make a T-Rex attack a Jeep. We can't come up with a firearm that isn't capable of firing live ammunition. Just for Hollywood's purposes, just a prop gun, a real prop gun.
Yeah, there are a few, but at the end of the day, it's always there's more of it. There's hundreds and thousands of guns out there. In Minority Report, you know, Spielberg paid a lot of extra money to bring. Beretta had a brand new gun coming out called the PX4, right? And it was so futuristic looking, he wanted Tom Cruise to have that gun in the film. So, you know, Beretta didn't have a blank firing, you know, simunitions version yet. They brought the actual gun, but he had a professional set with a good armor, and the police were supervising him. So nothing happened, right? But that's, I mean, in an Old West gun, there's really no change in the mechanism. And that's the issue. If you plug the barrel, people are going to see the plug in the barrel, like a starter's pistol.
But I mean,
at the end of the day,
if you do it right, if you have the right people around, I mean, how many movies that this doesn't happen in? I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, there are so many movies where there's just people shooting each other constantly, and this hasn't happened. That's a good thing. So I guess to your point, Ben, it's not that the gun on the set is the problem. It's the people that are handling it.
Yes, and the extra money for the non-union. The problem is armorers and technical advisors are not covered by IATSE. So it's always a who you know thing, and they're always underpaid and undercared for. So if you look at like John Wick, Keanu Reeves, not exactly, you know, a military guy, right? He's kind of a peacenik. But Keanu Reeves was sent to Terran Tactical for months and still goes and is a combat expert at this point. The man was trained. So the director paid for him to go and train him versus this where Alec Baldwin, you know, another loudmouth who hates guns, goes on a set and thinks he knows everything and has no technical advisor there, no one from an Old West shoot house to actually walk him through the operation of these weapons. And look what happens. And there's your problem.
Ben Maness, always appreciated, my friend. We'll post a link to your recent article at Philadelphia's Great Broad and Liberty. Really appreciate your expertise on this, Ben. Thank you, buddy.
My pleasure.